She was invisible at her daughter's wedding, swallowed by the perfect illusion of the day. Helen Martin, the woman who once lit up rooms with her quiet strength, now stood unnoticed in the shadows, the hum of a generator her only companion. Her daughter, radiant and oblivious, had no room for her in the celebration. But Helen, she was done being overlooked. By the end of the night, the lights would go out, but it wouldn't be her silence that spoke, it would be her power. And this time, no one would ignore it. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. I scanned the seating chart twice. Staff, that was me. The breeze caught the hem of my blouse as I stepped out of my truck, the rented generator thudding gently in the back. Early morning haze clung to the grass, dew glittering like tiny jewels under the tent lights strung along the trees. The vineyard looked like a magazine spread, not a detail out of place, not a single thing, except me. I parked far from the main path, on the gravel service road behind the catering van. The air smelled like rosemary, diesel, and the first breath of summer, a scent I once would have called hopeful. I climbed down, stretched my back, and ran a hand along the metal ridges of the generator. Just a quick favor, that's all this was. My daughter needed extra power for her sound setup. I had a generator. I offered, no big deal. I headed toward the check-in table, my sensible shoes sinking slightly into the soft earth. A young woman, with an earpiece and a clipboard, glanced up, then down again before I spoke. Double quotes, Helen. I'm here to help with the generator for the Peterson-Michaels wedding. She flipped a few pages. Her nails were painted a sleek, impenetrable gray. Right, she said. Your staff. She tore off a yellow utility badge and held it out to me, not quite meeting my eyes. I hesitated. I'm buff. She was already moving on, flagging down a DJ unloading speakers. I looked at the badge, STAFF, in block letters. Underneath, in Sharpie, Helen. I pinned it to my blouse, hands trembling a little. It wasn't the badge. It wasn't even the vest. She tossed my way a few moments later, safety orange with reflective strips. It was the list on the clipboard, the faint outlines of names that caught my eye as she walked away. My name was there once. Then someone had taken a pen and scratched a thick, definitive line through it. The sun crept higher. I got the generator going in less than 10 minutes, the hum vibrating through my knees and up into my ribs. I tucked the vest tighter and walked around the tent to the main path. Guests had started arriving, silks and linen and patent leather shoes on trimmed grass. Laughter already in the air, the kind that floats easily when people know they belong. No one looked at me. Not once. I saw Margie Feldstein, Anna's 6th grade teacher, greet the groom's parents like old friends. I saw Deborah, my ex's sister, sipping from a champagne flute and telling someone, well, I raised her, you know, and everyone nodding as if that were true. And then Anna, my daughter, stepped out from behind the floral arch. Radiant ivory lace hugged her figure, and her cheeks were flushed with something more than just makeup. She was smiling so hard her jaw must have ached. Someone said something, and she threw her head back and laughed, a real laugh. The kind I used to hear through the bathroom door when she was little and reading comics in the tub. She turned. Her eyes skimmed the crowd. Then past me. She didn't blink, didn't wave, didn't even register a flicker. I stood behind a potted ficus, a vest that made me glow like a traffic cone, and a name tag that made everything feel official. I shouldn't have come, but I had. I stayed. I moved behind the tent again, where the generator pulsed like a steady heartbeat. I sat on a plastic crate, fingers curled in my lap. It wasn't supposed to feel like this. I didn't expect confetti or champagne. I didn't want applause, but I thought maybe a thank you, a glance, a nod. The generator's switch was warm beneath my hand. Just for a second, I brushed it. The music floated through the tent canvas, light and airy, filling the air with everything I'd been left out of. And the thought came quiet, uninvited. She called me a blessing in her speech, but not by name. I heard my daughter's voice before I saw her. The mic crackled gently through the tent fabric, her words floating out with the breeze. I just want to say thank you, she said, and there was that same melodic lilt she used to put on for piano recitals, sweet but slightly distant. To everyone who's made this day possible. You are all such blessings in our lives. People clapped. Silverware chimed against glasses. Someone let out a loud whoop near the cake table. I stood a few paces from the power rig, half concealed behind a speaker draped in chiffon. pretending to check a voltage meter that didn't need checking. I kept my eyes down, but my ears strained for what wouldn't come. She didn't say my name. She didn't say my mother. Just everyone. A blanket tossed over a crowd, warm and impersonal. My fingers twitched against the edge of the speaker. I exhaled slowly, quietly. People were laughing now. Toasts maybe, more clinking, the kind of joy that builds and loops until you feel foolish for not joining in. "Excuse me," a man's voice said. I turned reflexively. A guest seersucker jacket, sunglasses perched in his graying curls, was peering toward the back tent flap. "Do you know who that older woman in the vest is? The one by the cables?" His companion, a young woman, in a mauve dress, wrinkled her nose. "The electrician's assistant, maybe." They moved on without waiting for an answer. I shifted my weight, the vest crackling against my blouse. My name was still there, barely written in Sharpie on that yellow tag like a child's place card at Thanksgiving. Forgotten until cleanup. A sharp crash came from inside the tent. I stepped instinctively toward it. One of the caterers, not more than 16, probably someone's niece doing weekend gigs, had dropped a tray of wine flutes. Glass glittered across the floor. A group of guests tittered awkwardly and stepped aside. No one bent down. I knelt silently and began picking up the shards. The girl looked up, eyes wide with panic. I didn't say a word. I just gathered glass like I had 100 times after sleepovers, after Christmas mornings, after the night Anna tripped, running down the hallway in my old heels. By the time the girl returned with a dustpan, most of it was already in my palm. "Thanks," she whispered, not meeting my eyes. "You're welcome," I said, softly. I stepped back behind the tent before anyone could notice the blood blooming faintly across my palm. I paused at the edge of the power station. Someone had arranged the wedding favors on a nearby table, monogrammed candles, in little gold mesh bags. I picked one up. I had paid for these. Anna had sent a text last fall. "Could you handle the favors? Something elegant but affordable. Doesn't need to have your name on it." She was right. It didn't, but still. When I heard Greg, her fiancé, laughing with his friends about how much effort he had put into choosing the perfect scent, I felt something crack just slightly behind my ribs. Lavender and sage. I chose that blend. He hated lavender. My phone buzzed. I checked it automatically, grateful for something to do. A message. No text, just an image. The photo was zoomed in, a little blurry, but the clipboard was unmistakable. My name, Helen Martin, scribbled out so hard the ink had bled through. No note, no context. I stared at it, pulse thudding. The crowd's laughter turning tinny in my ears. Somewhere behind me, the band struck up something upbeat. Someone popped a champagne cork. I sat down on the grass beside the generator, legs folding slow and deliberate, like an old movie reel winding down. I scrolled through my contacts, thumb hovering, and then moving with certainty. "Send me the backup contract." I typed and hit send. Every table had place cards except mine. I had a mop. A mop bucket stood near the kitchen tent like a joke someone forgot to explain. No one said anything when I walked over to it. They just looked relieved. One of the catering staff pointed toward the puddle from melting ice near the back entrance, and I found myself nodding, as if that had been my job all along. The handle of the mop was sticky. The mop head smelled faintly of bleach and floral disinfectant. I dragged it across the canvas flooring, my reflection smudged and warped beneath the thin film of water. A woman in a crisp black pantsuit strode by, clipboard, headset, teeth bared in a customer service smile. The planner, the one with the lacquered hair and glassy eyes. She paused just long enough to glance at me, then at the camera crew setting up by the cake table. "Please don't get in the pictures," she said, voice flat. I nodded once. She didn't wait for an answer. The photographer adjusted his lens as Anna and Greg posed, arms around each other, heads tipped together like a painting. Their smiles looked natural, familiar, practiced. Guests milled around their tables, napkins folded like birds, glassware catching the last gold of afternoon lights. Every table had a card, calligraphy in pale pink ink, tinted neatly by each setting. I walked past them slowly, eyes sweeping. Greg's college roommates, Anna's yoga instructor, her childhood dentist, no Helen, no mom, just the mop, just the vest. I moved back toward the edge of the tent where shadows pooled, and conversations turned to low hum. It was cooler there, the kind of invisible space I'd always moved through, easily when Anna was younger. when things between her father and me were louder than they should have been, when someone had to stay steady. But something was shifting now. The invisibility no longer felt graceful. It felt imposed. I leaned against a column, half hidden by drapery. As a cluster of guests passed, didn't the bride's mom help pay for the venue? I thought so. Didn't I hear something about favors, too? No, no, another voice chimed in, dismissive. Greg handled all that. Their voices blurred as they moved on, laughing. I didn't follow. I just stood there, pressing the pads of my fingers together, anchoring myself in the smallest motions. I started to notice things, the glances, the silences, who shifted uncomfortably when they saw me, who looked away, who pretended not to notice. Margie Feldstein, the teacher, spotted me and hesitated. She gave me a slow, ambiguous nod. Deborah, the sister-in-law, who always wore pearls like armor, offered nothing but a tight smile that never touched her eyes. Names lined up in my mind like a seating chart of their own. Who knew? Who said nothing? Behind the band's tent, I checked the generator out of habit, but then something caught my eye. The main power rig, now fully locked and labeled, had a laminated copy of the setup permit pinned beside it. I leaned in. My signature, sharp and unmistakable. Helen Martin, primary provider of electrical equipment and support services. Dated. Time-stamped. No one had even bothered to remove it. I stared at it for a long moment, not angry, not heartbroken, just certain. I reached into my vest pocket, where I kept the aspirin, the stained pen, the sticky notes I used to leave on Anna's lunch bags in elementary school. I wrote 4 words in tidy black ink, and pressed it gently onto the face of the generator. Respect has its limits. They rehearsed vows, I rehearsed silence. The vineyard glowed in shades of gold and coral, the last stretch of daylight draping everything in romantic pretense. Rows of white chairs faced the floral arch, every petal meticulously placed. Someone had even brought in rented doves. They cooed lazily in a wire crate near the podium. Anna stood under the arch, veil flipped over her shoulder, her expression trained and poised. The photographer moved around her like she was sculpture. Greg held a sheet of notes and practiced looking heartfelt. I stayed by the power rig, unseen. They rehearsed vows. I rehearsed silence. A breeze caught the edge of the sticky note I'd left earlier. Respect has its limits. I pressed it back down gently, then checked the generator's pressure valve, like it mattered. Mom, I turned. Anna stood a few steps away, bouquet in hand, her voice carefully soft but edged. She glanced toward the ceremony chairs, where a few guests were still filtering in for final run-throughs. Can I ask one thing? She said, adjusting a bracelet that hadn't belonged to anyone in our family. Just don't walk near the aisle while we're rehearsing. We're keeping it really clean visually. The aesthetic matters. I looked at her. I remembered holding that hand when she broke her wrist at 11, slipping on the wet back step. I remembered the way she clung to me in the hospital waiting room, mascara running down her face. And now, that same hand fidgeted with a bracelet, as if even asking me to vanish required decoration. I nodded once. She smiled, relieved, and walked away. My fingers itched. The generator hummed behind me, smooth and reliable. I walked around its backside, inspecting the fuel lines. It didn't need tending, but I needed something to do. One of the band techs ambled over, clipboard in hand, squinting at the dials. This thing, the backup or the main? The main, I said without thinking. He blinked. No backup. I shook my head. Not today. He gave a low whistle. Brave. These outdoor setups are touchy. Hope no one overloads the grid. I smiled without showing teeth. Me too. He walked off. Minutes passed. Greg fumbled a line. Anna laughed too loudly. The officianta woman with salt-streaked hair and a confident stance called for a reset. Then, without warning, the lights went dark. Not flickering, not dimming. Black. Guests murmured. The string quartet fell silent mid-bar. Someone near the back shouted, "What happened?" I was already moving. The generator's display blinked low fuel pressure. Not failure, just finicky. I adjusted the valve, restarted the ignition cycle, waited for the slow buildup of hum and power. Lights bloomed back to life, one row at a time. People cheered. Greg kissed Anna's hand dramatically. No one looked back to see who did it. I stepped away from the generator, the hum now steady again. I walked toward the rows of chairs, halfway between shadow and stage. Not one person turned. The world clicked back into its glossy illusion. lights warm and artificial as memory. I reached into my vest pocket, pulled out a small remote gray plastic, unremarkable. The override switch. I'd added it last month. After reading about silent cutoffs for remote loads, safety first. I felt the weight of it in my hand, not heavy, just sure. Then I opened my clutch and zipped it inside. One smooth motion. My fingers lingered on the zipper's teeth, cool, precise. No one had noticed me, but they would notice absence. The generator thrummed behind me, alive and obedient. And the switch, that was mine now. Right before I do, the lights went out, and so did I. The aisle shimmered in late sunlight, petals catching the gold as if someone had brushed each one with mica. Chairs lined up like solemn little judges, and under the arch, Anna looked like something out of a bridal catalog, elegant, untouched, precise. Greg stood beside her, fingers twitching around the bandbox in his palm. I stood behind the control tent, out of frame, where I belonged, apparently. The crowd hushed. The officiant stepped forward. Someone's phone chimed, but they silenced it fast. Anna smiled, a practiced smile, the one she wore when reporters came to the school fundraiser, when her boss gave her awkward compliments. It never reached her eyes. The officiant's voice echoed through the sound system. "We gather here today." The breeze stilled. Even the doves in their crate were quiet. My clutch felt heavier than it should have, but it wasn't nerves. It was power. Literal. The remote lay snug in the silk-lined pouch, the silent switch within reach of one thumb. Anna was breathing steady, bouquet perfectly tilted, lips parted in soft anticipation. "I do," she was about to say, and then she would kiss the man who had claimed credit for her candles, who laughed while my name disappeared from lists, who stared through me like bad glass. I pressed the button. It was almost beautiful. A second of stillness. Then the hum of the lights cut. Black. The fans stopped spinning. The mics popped once, then fell dead. The overhead string lights dimmed mid-glow, then vanished. Gasps, murmurs. A chair scraped loudly against the flooring. Someone let out a nervous laugh. Another voice asked, "Was this planned?" The officiant blinked, looking at her script. Now, unreadable, in the sudden dark. Greg turned his head, mouth moving with questions no one could hear. Anna's bouquet sagged slightly in her grip. I stepped away. No rush, just a quiet, deliberate pace. The kind I used to walk when I left school meetings early, when I slipped out of church after the second hymn, when I'd retreat from holidays that made room for everyone but me. No one stopped me. My shoes clicked against the gravel path. I passed the fountain where Anna used to toss pennies. I passed the old oak with the initials carved into the bark. Not mine. Never mind. Behind me, the chaos gathered volume. Someone had pulled out their phone flashlight. A DJ shouted something about breaker switches. A child cried. A groomsman tripped on a power cord. My phone buzzed. I looked. A single text from Anna. "What happened?" I typed slowly, calmly. "Me." I didn't wait for the dots to appear. I slipped the phone into my jacket pocket and kept walking. The contract had been clear. I wasn't just a helper. I wasn't just the woman with the generator. I was the sole power provider for the entire event, electrical and otherwise. It was all in the fine print. My company name, my liability coverage, my terms. No backup. No override. Just me. The courtyard grew quieter as I moved past the main gate. The sky had started to pinken, dusk unfolding like velvet. Somewhere behind me, a voice yelled something urgent. Then feet pounding gravel. I turned. The venue manager, thick neck, clipboard, sweat darkening his collar, jogged toward me, expression caught between rage and disbelief. "You did this," he barked, breath heaving. I stopped, one hand still on my clutch, and looked him straight in the eye. I didn't answer. Not yet. If they wanted light, they could pay for it with decency. The venue manager stopped a few feet from me, panting, like a bellows. "Ma'am, did you cut the power? We've got a packed house out there. Some of these people paid 5 figures just to be seen." I raised an eyebrow, calm as dusk. "They can still be seen. Just not clearly." He jabbed his clipboard toward me like it had legal weight. "You can't just walk off. There's a contract." I nodded. "There is, and I suggest you read it." I reached into my bag, not for the switch this time, but a folded copy of the vendor agreement. I handed it to him. His eyes skimmed the fine print, mouth falling open slightly as my name appeared again and again under every clause that mattered. Sole provider, full access, override authority. "I'm not just a helper," I said quietly. "I own the power." He blinked. You're Helen Martin. I am. Before he could respond, a high, familiar voice tore through the courtyard like a tuning fork hit wrong. Mom. Anna burst from the tent flaps, hair half loosed from its pins, a flashlight clutched awkwardly in one hand. What the hell did you do? Guests spilled out behind her, murmuring, waving phones, their faces caught between confusion and digital curiosity. I saw the phones tilted, capturing me from a distance, hashtags already forming. I didn't flinch. I shut off my generator, her voice pitched higher, tighter. You can't just, this is my wedding. You don't get to make it about you. I stepped closer, just enough that she had to look up. I didn't ask for it to be about me. I asked to be acknowledged. She flushed. Rage, embarrassment, something raw. So what? You humiliated me for. What? An apology. Yes, I said simply, in front of everyone. Not because I need it, because you do. Behind her, Greg's parents had moved into view. His mother's face was pale and pinched, jaw tight. Gregory, she snapped. Fix this now. The DJ's assistant tried to run a cord from a van, but I saw the sparks as he overloaded the breaker. Fools with wires. The crowd was shifting. People were whispering. Someone pointed at me. Someone else held their phone out like they were live streaming the drama. The photographer sat on the grass, arms folded. Greg approached, hair slicked back and eyes already calculating damage control. Helen, be reasonable, don't. I cut him off with a look. You called me a vendor when it suited you. That comes with terms. Anna's hand tightened around the flashlight. You'll never be forgiven for this. I'm not asking to be, I said. I'm asking to be seen. For a moment, everything stilled. And then Anna turned sharply, decisively walked back toward the arch, her bouquet forgotten, her heels sinking into the earth. We're doing it anyway, she snapped. No mics, no lights. I'll shout my vows if I have to. Some guests clapped, mostly out of social confusion. Others sat stiffly, already checking their phones, whispering about refunds and ruined dresses. The planner was on the verge of tears. I turned my back on all of it, the unraveling, let them untie themselves. I walked toward the service road, past the fountain, past the little chalkboard sign that still said welcome to our forever. My shoes made soft sounds against the gravel, each one steadier than the last. The sky was a deepening bruise, streaked with orange and blue. My phone buzzed. I hesitated, then checked it, a message, from a number I didn't recognize. What you did was genius. I didn't smile, but I kept walking. The reception glowed with tea lights and fury. They tried to salvage it with candles, dozens of tiny flames, flickering along the linen-covered tables, borrowed from the centerpieces and bathroom shelves. It gave the reception a kind of war-torn romance, as if the power outage were a stylistic choice. People leaned in close to see their food, to hear one another, but there was no music, no fans, no charm left to spin it at the corner booth of a diner 2 miles down the road. I stirred a mug of tea I didn't want. The formica table was chipped, the coffee lukewarm, but the Wi-Fi worked. My phone lit up in pulses, one photo after another. Anna's bouquet wilting in her hand, a collapsed tent flap from an unpowered support rig, guests fanning themselves with menu cards, sweat lining the backs of their silk dresses. No speeches, no dancing. The DJ had packed up, cables coiled like ropes. The cake sagged in the heat, icing sloughing down one side like a landslide. By 9 o'clock, the kitchen had gone dark, the caterers gone home. People were leaving with their gift bags clutched like lifeboats. The screen lit up with another ping, a message from Jules, an old friend from my quilting circle who'd RSVP. No, but always watched everything online. They're blaming the venue. I let the message sit. I stared at it. Then at the speck of lipstick on the rim of my cup. I didn't respond. Outside the window, the sky had gone deep navy. The streetlights blinked amber over the hood of my truck. I watched a moth batter itself against the glass, frenzied and directionless. Another photo loaded on my screen. Anna in the center of the dance floor, barefoot and furious, trying to lead a slow dance to someone's phone speaker. Greg beside her, tense-jawed, checking his watch between awkward sways. Hashtag wedding unplugged. The captions beneath were merciless. Epic fail, or candlelit fairy tale. You decide. No power, no vibe, no class. I paid for filet mignon, and got finger sandwiches. I didn't smile, but I did feel something loosen in my chest. Not satisfaction, not glee. Just breath. A new message appeared. The contact, Anna's event sheet master. The one I'd built over 9 months. Contacts, invoices, rentals, even the emergency evacuation protocol. I held my finger over the screen and deleted it. No backup, no regrets, just clean space. The waitress came by, topped off the tea with a glance that asked nothing. She had probably seen all kinds of brides in this place, after parties, pre-drunks, the occasional runaway. My phone buzzed again. I checked it out of reflex. A new name, one I hadn't expected. Lena. My niece, Anna's cousin, the only one who used to draw me cards shaped like stars. The one who wore sneakers under her communion dress and said she wanted to grow up to be just like Auntie Helen, quiet but strong. The message was short. Just 6 words. Auntie, you were right. I read it again, then again, and this time, I did smile. The sun rose, but Anna's world didn't. Sunlight poured in through the blinds like it hadn't heard the news. The motel room smelled like lemon cleaner and quiet. I hadn't slept that well in years. No alarms, no texts, no lists running behind my eyelids. Just stillness, solid and earned. I made a cup of coffee from the dusty pod machine and sat cross-legged on the bed, phone in hand, robe loosely tied. The internet was already humming. Anna's face was everywhere, not the bridal shots she had planned. No soft filters or perfect edits. These were raw, her yelling at the planner, mascara smeared, one heel off, dress creased. A wide-eyed shot of her holding a phone flashlight like a dagger. The hashtags had mutated. Overnight. Blackout bride, hashtag power trip wedding, hashtag no lights, no license. People didn't ask what happened. They chose sides. The planner had gone private. The DJ posted a passive-aggressive apology. I tried to stay, but no electricity equals no party. Hope y'all got your money's worth. Underneath, someone replied, did they even pay you? That thread ran deep. Photographers, florists, one of the caterers, unpaid invoices, disputed Venmos, excuses forwarded, screenshotted, dragged into the light. Greg's name showed up beside a bounced deposit. Anna's signature, more elegant than legal, appeared on a contract labeled void. I sipped my coffee and opened my photo app. I scrolled until I found it. That sticky note on the generator. Respect has its limits. I posted the photo to my private account as friends, quilting groups, some old students, but I added a caption that wasn't just for them. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. I didn't tag anyone. By noon, it had over 600 shares. I muted my notifications and opened my email instead. The subject line, Re-Event Billing Inquiry, Gregory Michaels and Anna Peterson. My lawyer had followed up like I asked. When I clicked open the attachment, I saw what I expected. Invoices marked, disputed, not denied, not refunded, just frozen. That's when I made the call. It's time, I said. I want the fraud claim opened. For the unpaid vendor list. For falsified contract. And for misusing my company's name without consent. She paused only a second before saying, understood. It felt oddly like planting something. Not vengeance. Just roots, facts, a paper trail with teeth. Another ping. A new email. This one from a junior coordinator I remembered from the setup days. She'd been the one taping signs and running errands in ballet. Flats too small for her feet. Her message was brief. I know I shouldn't, but I wanted to say, you were right. They altered paperwork. I wasn't supposed to say anything, but it didn't feel fair. I'm sorry. Let me know if you need anything. I sat back against the pillows and let it wash over me. Not vindication. Not revenge. Something gentler. Something steadier. Something earned. And then, with a small click, I forwarded the email to my lawyer. The case was real now, and so was the record. I set my coffee down, pulled the curtains wider, and let the sun have the room. It didn't feel like beginning again. It felt like starting correctly. My phone buzzed again. This time, I smiled before I even checked it. She knocked on my door. For the first time, she looked small. The knock was soft. Not the frantic pounding of someone trying to explain, or the impatient rap of a person who still thinks the world owes them time. Just 3 measured taps, like she wasn't sure she had the right house anymore. I set my mug down. It was still warm, mint. This time, through the peephole, I saw her, hair limp, mascara, a ghost of its former self, one sandal strap broken and dragging against the porch rail. Anna, my daughter. The last time she'd stood on this porch, she was 19 and drunk on freedom, laughing with a friend who called my couch quaint. She hadn't looked back then, either. I opened the door. No words, just space. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of something heavier than bridal tulle. "Hi," she said, voice rough and soft, like it had been run through gravel. I didn't step aside. She looked past me, maybe expecting to see boxers or lawyers, or a camera crew. Instead, the scent of lemon balm, an Afghan folded over the armchair, and the low hum of a quiet life continuing. I came to. Her hands fluttered like they were used to holding things, a bouquet, a mic, a story, but there was nothing now. I wanted to say I'm sorry. The word felt too rehearsed, too round in her mouth, like she'd shaped it for an audience. I waited. She went on. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I didn't know Greg didn't pay people, and the power thing. I was stressed. I said things I shouldn't have. I know you were trying to help. Still, I said nothing. Her lips pressed tight. The silence shifted. Not forgiving, not dramatic. Just heavy. You don't have anything to say, she asked finally, blinking too fast. I studied her, the bags under her eyes, the way she twisted her ring finger even though there was no ring. Then, I asked, would you have treated me better if no one had noticed? She blinked. What? If no one had seen me? If the lights hadn't gone out? If I'd stayed quiet, invisible, helpful? Would you have treated me better? She didn't answer. Not even a breath. I let the question hang between us. Not a trap, just a mirror. Her chin wobbled. For a second, I thought maybe she'd say something real, something earned, but she didn't. I stepped back, just enough to push the door forward between us. No slam, just a quiet click, and then I locked it. Not out of malice, just out of practice. I picked up my tea and returned to the kitchen window. Outside, Anna stood still for a moment, her figure framed by the rose bushes I'd pruned last spring. Then she turned and walked back to her car, her shadow smaller than I remembered. The tea was cool now, but not bitter. I was about to sit when I saw the van pull up. Courier, official. The man stepped out in a windbreaker and ball cap, clipboard in hand. I opened the door again. Helen Martin, he asked. Yes. He handed me the envelope, thick and heavy with consequence. Filed, civil notice, claim of damages, unpaid vendor accounts, Peterson Michael's wedding. I turned the envelope in my hands. Crisp and CREASED. The tea could wait. She thought guilt could buy grace. It couldn't. I sat at the kitchen table, the unopened envelope beside me, like a guest who'd overstayed their welcome. The house was quiet again, the kind of quiet that wasn't lonely. It was chosen. My mug steamed gently beside my laptop. Mint, as always. The tea didn't ask questions. I opened a fresh document. The words came easily, without heat. I received notice of legal action. As we anticipated, it centers on unpaid vendor contracts and falsified arrangements for services billed under my company name. Attached are copies of the altered documents, including the junior planner's email confession and annotated invoices from the 3 largest contractors, all unpaid. I attached the PDFs one by one, then I paused. Below it, I added, if and when damages are awarded, I'd like my portion after legal fees donated to the Rose and Briar Transitional Shelter. Quietly, no name on a plaque, just power, redirected where it matters. I signed it, closed the laptop, and let the digital hum fade. Outside, a breeze rustled the edge of the newspaper still folded on the porch. The morning headlines were filled with louder things: elections, fires, a market shift. But below the fold, in a quieter font, was a link I recognized. Power Comes Quietly by Helen Martin. The blog post had gone live. I hadn't planned on writing it, but after the 4th email from someone asking if they could quote my sticky note, I sat down one night and told the story, not of the wedding, not of Anna, but of silence, of the women I'd watched for decades swallow entire seasons of resentment for the sake of family portraits and good lighting, of the years we spend learning to make ourselves useful, but not seen. And how one generator switch, flipped in deliberate quiet, could be more honest than any toast. I refreshed the page out of habit. New comments, dozens. Some were just clapping emojis or brief thank yous, but others stopped me. I left my daughter's wedding 3 years ago. She never noticed. You helped me grieve that. I thought it was just me. I thought I was crazy for expecting basic respect. You helped me walk away from the guilt, from the idea that mothers can't want anything for themselves. I leaned back and stared at the screen. the cursor blinking beneath my own name. Not a scream, not a manifesto, just a shift. Another ping. An email. This one from a woman in North Dakota. 3 kids, widow. She ran a caregiver support group and had started reading my post aloud at meetings. They said it felt like a weather report for their insides. She wrote, not a storm warning, a temperature reading, real, measured, familiar. I closed the message gently, let it sit in the inbox like a note folded in a coat pocket. And then the mail arrived. A slim envelope, heavy cardstock, handwritten, not printed, the kind that still carries weight. The return address, Bayview Civic Center. Caregiver Resilience Initiative inside. A letter. We are organizing a summit on caregiver identity and advocacy. Several of our members shared your post. Would you consider being our opening speaker? We don't want a hero. We want someone who understands what it feels like to be both strong and disappeared. I read it twice, then again. Not fame, not a podium, just a room of chairs and women and stories like mine. The kettle began to whistle. The house stayed still, and in the quiet, I unfolded the invitation like a map. They kept me off one stage. I made my own. The Bayview Civic Center didn't have chandeliers or champagne flutes. No archways wrapped in silk. No string quartet waiting for a cue. Just rows of folding chairs, a wood-paneled podium, and a pitcher of water sweating under fluorescent lights. And yet, the silence in that room held more reverence than any wedding I'd ever attended. I stood behind the podium, palms resting on either side. No paper, no slideshow, just my voice. Steady now. I'm not here to tell you how to get your children to love you, I began. I'm here because I once mistook silence for peace. Because I was taught, like so many of us, that usefulness was the same as worth. The audience leaned in. A woman in the third row clutched a notebook so tight her knuckles were pale. Another pressed her hand to her collarbone like something there needed protection. I spent 3 decades keeping the lights on, figuratively, and then literally, I said, and the first time I turned them off, not because I failed, but because I chose to stop. That's when I realized power doesn't have to shout. No applause yet. Just breath, sharp, unguarded. I told them about the wedding, the clipboard, the vest, the generator switch that hummed like a held breath, and the note I left like a final benediction. I didn't name Anna. I didn't have to. When I finished, there was a moment, just one, where no one moved. Like the whole room had been holding their ribs in place. Then came the applause. Not thunderous, intentional. A woman near the back stood to clap, tears running freely down her cheeks. She didn't bother to wipe them. That was me too, she said, her voice trembling but full. Others nodded. Someone whispered every word. Afterward, I stood by the refreshment table, letting the tide of small thanks and quiet stories rise and roll over each one, its own lifetime held in a breath. A short woman with cropped silver hair approached, wearing a linen jacket and a sharp, clear gaze. I'm a small publisher, she said, independent, mostly memoirs and quiet rebellions. I think your story could help more people than this room holds. Would you consider writing it? I smiled, not out of surprise, but recognition. The idea had been lingering for days, like steam. After a boil, I'll think about it, I said, but I already knew the answer. That night, back at home, I sat with my feet tucked beneath me, the summit program folded beside my mug. Mint again. I opened my phone, not for updates, not for comments, just curiosity. The speech had gone semi-viral. A local journalist had recorded it, posted a clip. Mother reclaims power, not spotlight. The title made me laugh softly into my sleeve. But then the messages began. Then one. I didn't expect. Anna, you've humiliated me publicly. Was it worth it? I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting for an answer. So was I. Some messages don't deserve replies, just peace. The message sat there, lit in blue. Anna's words, sharp and unfinished even in their punctuation. You've humiliated me publicly. Was it worth it? I stared at it for a long moment, not out of hesitation, but acknowledgement, not of her anger, but of my own absence from it. Then, I pressed and held delete. Some messages aren't a conversation. Some are a mirror, and I'd already seen what I needed to. I powered down the phone and slipped it back into the drawer. The house exhaled around me. Outside, the late morning sun filtered through the lattice. I stepped into the garden barefoot, the flagstones warm beneath my soles. and let my hands trail along the tops of the rosemary and sage. The same blend I'd once chosen for wedding favors, someone else claimed credit for. Now they just grew here. Honest, UNTAMED. I clipped a few sprigs and brought them back inside, tying them together with twine and setting them on the windowsill to dry. The scent filled the room like memory that didn't hurt anymore. In the quiet, I opened a new document on my computer, not for a memoir, not yet, just a practical one. I labeled it, Updated Will, Draft 2. Simple adjustments. Legal clarity. My assets weren't vast, but they mattered, and I wanted them to go where they'd be honored. Not out of spite, but of purpose. Next, I logged into the donation portal for a power restoration nonprofit I'd supported quietly for years. This time, I clicked the In Honor of Field. Name, Anna Peterson. Note, for all the times we needed light. I didn't linger on the receipt. That afternoon, I met with the director of the Bayview Civic Center. We sat on the same folding chairs. From the summit, the air smelling faintly of dust and old ambition. I want to organize a workshop, I said. Something small. Dignity and identity for unpaid caregivers. Stories, tools, maybe just space. She smiled, slow and understanding. You'd be surprised how many chairs we can fill. By the time I got home, the garden was bathed in shadow. I poured a cup of mint tea and checked the blog out of habit. 50,000 readers. I scrolled through the comments, mothers, daughters, grandmothers, strangers who felt like old friends. Then I saw one that made me stop mid-sip. It was from a username. I didn't recognize it first, just a string of letters and numbers. But the comment, best blackout of my life. I finally got paid. Thanks, Helen. A vendor. One of the ones erased. Then remembered. The light in the room softened, and I smiled, not for the impact, not for the reach, but for the reply I didn't have to write. They shut me out of their light, so I made my own. The wedding wasn't big, 50 guests at most. Backyard fairy lights, a white runner on grass, and folding chairs wrapped in tool bows that didn't quite match. There was a charm to it, though something unpolished but whole. I stood near the edge of the tent, not in uniform, not behind anything, just a woman in a simple navy dress, hair pinned back, a clutch that held nothing but lip balm, and a napkin with notes I'd already memorized. The bride found me before the procession started. Her name was Karina, dressed with pockets. She wrapped her arms around me before I could step back. You don't know what it meant, she said into my shoulder. I read your story the week we almost canceled. I was going to fold, Helen, let people steamroll the whole thing. And then I read that line, power doesn't have to shout. It stuck. I pulled back, smiling gently. It's your day. You made it yours. She grinned, mascara already smudging from joy instead of stress, because someone showed me how, as she walked down the aisle later, beaming and barefoot. I felt a weight lift I hadn't realized I still carried. The ceremony was short and loud in the right places, laughter, vows made with the hiccups of real emotion. And when it ended, I was ushered toward the mic for the toast. I hadn't expected one, but the groom handed it to me like he was passing a baton, and the guests quieted. I won't keep you from cake or dancing, I said, voice steady through the small speaker system. But I'll say this, when we show up for each other, especially when it's inconvenient or unglamorous, we're not just building events, we're building memory. And memory needs truth more than perfection. Scattered claps, then building. A few cheers. I raised my glass of sparkling cider. To truth, to choice, and to the kind of power that doesn't flicker. The applause swelled. People stood. I stepped down without fanfare. Not out of humility, just clarity. I knew who I was now. Later, near the pie table, a little girl in glittery sneakers tugged on my sleeve. Her hair was full of bobby pins and rebellion. Are you famous? She asked, tilting her head. I laughed, crouching a bit. No, sweet pea. Just visible now. She seemed satisfied by that and ran off, trailing petals. A photographer waved me into a group shot. For once, I didn't fade into the edge. I stood front and center, hands at my sides, smile calm and earned. When the shutter clicked, I didn't flinch. Back home, I kicked off my shoes and poured the last of the mint tea. The house was warm, with the memory of celebration. Then the email arrived. Subject, final draft cover art. Clicked. The image opened slowly, like a sunrise. There it was. My name, my story, my silhouette against the backdrop of light towers and wild sage. Title: The Generator, Woman, and the subtitle, so small but firm, How I Took the Power Back. Quietly, my hand hovered over the keyboard, and I felt it, not pride, not relief, recognition. She asked to meet. I chose the cafe, my table, my terms. It was the same cafe where I'd once opened a court summons, where the tea came in ceramic pots, not paper cups, and the walls held more plants than paintings. I requested the window table north side, facing out, the one where light lingered long after the rest of the room dimmed. Anna was already there. When I arrived, that surprised me. She stood as I approached, shoulders slightly squared but softened, not performative, not scared, just uncertain. A woman without a script. I nodded at her, then sat across without offering a hug. She mirrored me quietly, no fanfare, no pleasantries. I know I don't have a right to ask you here, she began, voice brittle but intact. But I didn't know where else to take what's left. I said nothing. She folded her hands around her mug. She hadn't touched the tea. I've lost almost everything, she continued. Friends, opportunities. Greg left 3 weeks after the lawsuit. His parents won't speak to me. Even my boss told me to go find some humility. She paused. I think they meant it kindly. Still, I said nothing. I used to think I had it together, that being in control meant being right. Her voice caught just once, but I was cruel and careless, and not just at the wedding. She looked up at me. No tears, just weariness. I know I treated you like equipment, not a mother, not a person. I thought the way to survive was to stay polished. And I think now, I might have polished myself out of a family. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't waiting for me. It was hers to hold. I reached into my bag, not for a speech, just a white envelope, sealed neatly, without a name. I set it on the table between us. She stared at it. I'm not here to fix you, I said quietly. I'm not here to be fixed. She nodded slowly. Then, what is that? Clarity. I stood. My coat hung loose over one shoulder, but my voice was sure. You can open it or not, but I won't be here to explain it. She didn't try to stop me. I walked out, past the front counter, where 2 women were laughing about something trivial, and into the sunlight that spilled like an answer. Outside, the air smelled like cinnamon and change. Behind me, I didn't look back, but through the cafe window, I caught it. Anna tearing the envelope open with both hands, reading the single line, written in the same ink I used for grocery lists, workshop agendas, court declarations. Learn to power yourself. And her face, her carefully controlled, one scam-ready face folded in. Not with drama. Recognition. I didn't flip a switch. I walked into my light. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I walked past the vineyard. Same curved path, same ancient oaks guarding the drive, same ivy climbing the wrought iron gate. The venue hadn't changed, at least, not on the outside, but I had. Laughter drifted from the main house, carried on the wind along with the faint notes of a saxophone. Not the wedding march, not strings or ballads, just something warm and alive. Someone else's day, someone else's vows. I stopped at the edge of the property and let the music reach me. The kind of joy that didn't need volume. I didn't try to see who the bride was. I didn't need to. I smiled lightly, genuinely, not out of nostalgia, not out of regret, but because it felt like walking past a place where once something hard had happened, and knowing it couldn't hurt me anymore. On the way home, I stopped at the market and bought myself lilies, not for anyone, not for mourning, just because I like how they opened slow, like truth. Back on my porch sat a cardboard box, return label, the publisher. I carried it inside and set it gently on the table. The packing tape peeled like skin from fruit, and inside 10 copies. Generator Woman, How I Took the Power Back. Quietly. Matte finish, my silhouette against soft amber tones. No dramatic shadows, just presence. I ran my hand over the cover like one might smooth a wrinkle from memory. I placed one on the mantel, beside a picture of my mother holding a rake, her boots half buried in dirt, eyes sharp, not smiling, but solid. The rest I slid neatly into a canvas tote. Some I'd donate, one I'd keep for Lena. That evening, I dressed slowly, navy again, clean lines, flat shoes. The Civic Center had invited me to a local honor ceremony. Small. No stage, just folding chairs and string lights and a table of iced tea and cheese cubes. When they called my name, the applause was gentle, not a roar, not a standing ovation, but the kind that people mean. I stepped forward and accepted the plaque glass, heavy, etched with simple words, advocacy through stillness. I didn't give a speech. I just nodded and said, "Thank you for listening." Afterward, a woman, with soft eyes and silver roots leaned in and asked, "Did your daughter come?" "No," I said. She touched my wrist lightly. "Still proud of you." I looked at her. "I think that's mine to hold." That night, at home, the house was dark except for the kitchen lamp. I made my mint tea. I sat at the same table where, months ago, I'd signed documents, opened lawsuits, deleted apologies. Now there was nothing left to correct. I opened my blog. One last post. Title. Last line. I was never background. I was the power. 7 words. Number. Tags. No elaboration. Just a truth that no longer needed convincing. I hit publish. And closed the laptop. Outside, the world hummed. Somewhere a train passed. A dog barked down the block. But inside, it was still, not silent, just sure. I walked barefoot into the hallway, paused in the glow of the nightlight. The lilies I'd bought were already starting to unfold. I didn't flip a switch. I didn't need to. I walked into my light, and for once fully completely I stayed.